Hello and welcome back to this Downful Idealistic Crusade. This will be a very short book review because I was finally able to read this beautiful autobiography by the one and only legendary Joseph Cotten. This is his 1987 autobiography entitled the absolutely great Vanity Will Get You Somewhere. This is a fantastic must read for any fan of the great legendary actor Joseph Cotten, and of course his great almost lifelong friendship with Orson Welles. So Welles is mentioned throughout this book and pops up when Cotten is recounting bits about Citizen Kane and the Mercury Theater and the Magnificent Ambersons, and of course even his little cameo in Touch of Evil, which was entirely unexpected. I first became aware of this book because I read that apparently Welles himself was proofreading an advance copy to give a blurb for when this was originally going to come out, and he was actually reading it when he died, or around that time period. So that's an unfortunate note, but that's how I first became aware that Cotten had actually written an autobiography, and this would come out in 1987. It's not a super common book, but you can find it in used bookshops like I did. It just had always been on my radar. But this is a wonderful book. It's not very long. It clocks in at a little over 200 pages, so it is a rather quick read. But to be honest, you don't want to read it quickly because the whole thing is written in his inimitable voice. So basically it's like you're literally hearing him talk about his life in book form, and his anecdotes, his reflections, and not just the anecdotes about films, but about his early days, his childhood, which he goes into in pretty great detail. His early days as a struggling actor, and how his family took that, and how it took him quite some time to quote unquote make it as any sort of a name. Also love the image they chose for the title page. There is a pretty nice photo still section, which starts with, of course, the baby photos. It's got a nice gloss to it, so there is nice image reproduction, which didn't always happen. It was getting more common in biographies and autobiographies at this point in the late 80s, but still it didn't happen all the time, and it's nice when it did. Of course, there are plenty of film stills and some on-set behind-the-scenes stills as well. So that's in the center of the book, but it's such a wonderful experience. It's like you're getting to spend at least a few hours or a couple days in your week with the great Joseph Cotten himself, and he doesn't sugarcoat things. He does talk about some of his own personal failings, which always makes it much more enriching reading somebody's book, and instead of them just doing the what is unfortunately too common, especially these days in biographies and autobiographies, of only talking about the positives and sugarcoating a lot of things and sort of rewriting history a little bit to make yourself look better. Well, he doesn't do that. you wouldn't really expect him to. And it's just such a warm and rewarding volume that I would recommend it to any classic Hollywood fan. Any Orson Welles fanatic must read this. Welles himself was apparently touched and very, very moved by reading the advance copy before he died. And Cotten does go into his health troubles towards the end of his life, because that affected the actual publishing of this book. It literally has a point where it ends, and then all of a sudden the next chapter is talking about what had happened to him, and how he wound up losing his iconic voice for a time, and some of the various health scares he was going through. And that's basically like a postscript to this book, so it did postpone it a little bit. So it wound up coming out in 1987. I don't know if there's a later published version. I don't know that there is, because I've never actually seen another copy of this floating around, but it's just been on my to-read list for far too long, and I was super excited to find a copy. And once I started reading it, I really just couldn't stop. I couldn't put it down, because it is literally like you're getting to spend some time with Joseph Cotten, and reading his prose, reading his book is literally like hearing directly from the man himself. You can hear him almost narrating in your head. You can hear his iconic voice as you're reading the prose. So it would be it would have been nice to have had perhaps an audio version of, but you can hear his voice in your head as you're reading. That's how good and wonderful the prose is. Again, he does give some anecdotes about his most famous films, like The Third Man. He talks a little bit about his Mercury days. He talks a lot about Wells throughout his life. Even talks a little bit about working with Marilyn Monroe on Niagara and some of his other famous co-stars. And of course, as would be befitting the gentleman Joseph Cotten, nothing that is, quote unquote, dishy or things. Although he does talk about the infamous kick given to the backside of one of the, shall we say, legendary, infamous Hollywood gossip columnists when they were being their most ingratiating. That is a well-known Hollywood anecdote, so it was fun to get it from his perspective. And also, what I knew that they were on great terms, and of course he had worked for Selznick for a long time and had a long-standing contract with Selznick, but I wasn't aware of the extent of the personal, deep friendship between Joseph Cotten and David O. Selznick, and how deeply it affected him when Selznick died. So I knew they were friendly, and of course Cotten was in a great many Selznick classics and had a contract with Selznick, but I didn't know just quite to the extent of how personally well acquainted and how deep their friendship was on a personal level outside of business work. So that was also really interesting. So again, if you're a fan of Joseph Cotten, a fan of Orson Welles and the whole of the Mercury Theater, or just a fan of classic Hollywood in general, and you absolutely adore reading great books and autobiographies, then Cotten's book is a must-read if you can get a copy, again, with the fantastic title, Vanity Will Get You Somewhere. So if you've read this before or seen it in a library, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, or if this piques your interest, which I hope it would, definitely let me know what you think. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.